Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and by lovely, I mean it's lovely in spirit, not particularly in climate. It's actually pretty gloomy today. We've got low-hanging sort of slate gray, or even, I don't know, one notch darker than slate gray clouds. It's light out, but not super light. Grim. It's also it's been rainy. We've seen a fair amount of rain in the street, and so everything's a little bit wet. But that's okay. So today I was thinking about what I might talk about, and realized I haven't done a Message from the Deep episode in a while. For those of you new to the podcast, a Message from the Deep is an episode where I sort of take a game that I'm really familiar with and kind of do a deep dive review of it. And sometimes I'll do that in a pair. I'll pick two games that I want to talk about. And actually this time, I think what I'm going to do is talk about a publisher, and that's Flying Frog Productions. I was looking at the history of my show, and I did not see anything indicating that I'd done this theme before, but I thought I would mention maybe I have. This is in the 560s in terms of number of episodes, so anything could be true at this point. Also, full disclosure, one more thing before I do this. So I discovered Flying Frog Games in 2000, or Flying Frog Productions is the game company, in 2009 when a student did a presentation in my zombie class about the game Last Night on Earth, which I acquired shortly thereafter and have enjoyed ever since. Since then, I came to like other games from that company, including A Touch of Evil and Fortune and Glory. Meanwhile, sometime in there, after I learned about Last Night on Earth and acquired it, my good friend Rolf, whom I've been friends with since I was in high school, became an employee at Flying Frog Productions. And I now end up seeing him regularly over online because we play role-playing games together. And I see him usually once a year at Gen Con because he comes to Gen Con with Flying Frog to work in their booth. This is by means of full disclosure to let you know I'm good friends with somebody who works at Flying Frog, so at what level you think that might influence what I have to say here about their games, so be it. Okay, so Flying Frog has, four main games in their stable and one sort of light game that I can think of. Actually, five now that I think about it. Hold on. Flying Frog Productions has 6 games in their catalog, 2 of which I have not played, 2 of which I've played once each, and then 2 of which I'm very familiar with. So I'm going to cover all the ones I'm not that familiar with first, and then I'll spend the rest of my time talking about the 2 I know best. So the 2 games I have not played, there's a game called Dark Gothic, which is a deck building game themed around investigations of supernatural horrors in colonial New England. It uses a lot of the same visual assets as A Touch of Evil, and it's sort of set in the world. It might even be a Touch of Evil game, I don't know. I have not played that one. The other game of theirs that I have not had a chance to play is It Came from Outer Space, or Aliens from Outer Space, something like that, which is a game set with a very similar rule set to Last Night on Earth, and it's in fact, I think, designed so that it can be played with Last Night on Earth in a sort of combined game. It's about aliens invading, and I think there's clown aliens as well or something. Like I said, I haven't played that. I do have availability to play it, so I probably will at some point, but since I haven't played that, I can't really talk about that one either. Now, 2 of their games I've played one time each, so I'll talk about them for a moment. The first one is Shadows of Brimstone. This is their most recent and widely, heavily supported title. They've put out, I think, 6 different big boxes for this game, and they're all interchangeable. The premise is it's sort of an Old West. I think the first set is Old West, and then they had samurai era Japanese, and then most recently Vikings. And the idea is that you're a group of heroes from this era, and you encounter interdimensional doors that lead you to other places where scary monsters live, and you fight them, and then you go back and you game you sort of ramp up. It's a campaign game with a lot of the sort of signature elements of Flying Frog games, really robust cards, lots of counters, lots of finicky rules, lots of dice rolling. It's a good time, and I really enjoyed it the one time I played it. I haven't had an opportunity to play it much more than that. We do have a set of Shadows of Brimstone at Toggle Gaming, so at some point I may try to get that played on a more regular basis, maybe next year. Maybe that could be one of my goals, once a month or something. But because of that, I can't really talk about it much more than that. The one I played was one of the Old West ones, and it was a fun time. I had a good time with it. So that's Shadows of Brimstone. Like I said, I haven't played it very much. And finally, the fourth game is actually one I own. We've only played it one time. It just hasn't made its way back to the table. But I did enjoy it enough to keep it. I've kept it in my collection, and this is Fortune and Glory. Now, Fortune and Glory is loosely based, inspired by pulp adventures, like the same kinds of adventures that inspired Indiana Jones. In the game, you are world traveling treasure hunters trying to find treasures and fight various evil groups, including Nazis and some sort of made-up groups like the Red Hand, and I think there's maybe one other set. I think in the base game it's just Nazis, though. I could be wrong about that. Anyhow, in the game you are going from place to place trying to solve quests and find treasures, and one of the things that happens is you have these the most interesting mechanism is you have these cliffhanger moments where you get halfway through an adventure and something goes wrong, and then it's left in a cliffhanger until the next time you have an adventure, and then so it's someone else's turn. I had a good time playing it, but we did not come back to it, so I can't really speak much more to it than what I've just described. So that sets aside the games I haven't played and the games I've only played once, well, which leaves me with Last Night on Earth and A Touch of Evil. Now, both of these games I've played many times each. If I had to estimate, I would say Last Night on Earth is probably in the neighborhood of 10 times, and A Touch of Evil is probably in the neighborhood of 6 times. Now, these are generally pretty long games. Last Night on Earth usually runs 2 to 3 hours, maybe a little shorter. A Touch of Evil usually runs a little bit longer, often between the 3 and 4 hour mark. And I've played, like I said, both pretty extensively. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what the games are like, why you might pick one over the other, and maybe do a little bit of comparison between the two. I don't really want to make this a dual episode, but I guess that's the way I'm leaning. Briefly what they're like. Last Night on Earth is a zombie game. It's actually called The Zombie Game. And it's set around the idea of sort of a cheesy B-movie zombie movie. So pretty corny in terms of the way that the story is being told. The characters are all sort of hyper genre specific characters. So like when you're playing, you're the town priest, or you're the sheriff, or you're the high school cheerleader, or you're the farm girl, or you're the nurse, or you're the football star, or the drifter from out of town. Like there's a bunch of, they all have character names, but they fit these generic roles. The game is a us versus many game. At its highest player count, it's 6 players, 2 zombies, 2 zombie players, and 4 human players. My favorite player count is probably either 3 players, where you have 2 players playing 2 humans each and 1 player playing all the zombies, or 5 players where you have, or 6 players, I guess, where you have 4 humans and 2 zombie players. At those numbers, the dice rolling and different actions get spread about pretty easily. The big trick with Last Night on Earth is just making sure that you keep the turns moving. This is also the trick with A Touch of Evil, but in the game, you are one of those humans. There is a scenario card that gives a goal for the round. It could be something as simple as kill a certain number of zombies, and then the humans are trying to kill the zombies. It could be to escape town. So you have to find keys and the keys to the truck and gas, and then get out of town. It could be defend the mansion. So there's a scenario where there's a mansion in the middle of the board, and the goal of the humans is to keep the mansion inviolate until the end of the game. So those are just a couple examples. Okay, so that's A Touch of Evil. Generally, that's the way the game works. In terms of style, the art is all photographs. So that's one of the things that makes the Flying Frog games, everything before Shadows of Brimstone, really distinctive, is they all use Photoshop or photographs that have been done with like makeup and clever costumes, and then a little bit of Photoshop. It gives them a really distinct kind of goofy look, but really in keeping with the theme. Like if you're talking about a sort of cheesy zombie movie, having cheesy photos really fits. It makes the theme really work well. A Touch of Evil is in a similar vein. It looks similar to Last Night on Earth in terms of the style, except that everything's about colonial America. It's sort of really about the investigation of a supernatural entity in colonial America. What makes A Touch of Evil different, that in this game, instead of being teams, humans and zombies, you are individual investigators trying to find and defeat the big bad. The game does come with a co-op mode where you're all investigators working together to try to find and defeat the big bad. That one's a little bit less contentious, and also generally features fewer fights with the big bad guy. Often you go until everybody's ready and then you all do one big fight against the bad guy, as opposed to in the competitive mode, you're kind of racing to get the stuff you need to fight the bad guy. The game itself involves moving around and doing investigations, and some of the investigations will result in bad things happening. A lot of them will result in you finding equipment or finding different benefits. This is also part of Last Night on Earth, is searching for equipment, which is a crucial part of getting the humans armed up enough that they can defeat the zombies. In both games, make extensive use of outcome randomness, so the humans and the zombies fight each other, or the humans fight the minions of the big bad in A Touch of Evil, and you fight by rolling dice. And generally, in both of these games, they're opposed dice rolls with concurrent wounds. So in both games, you could do damage to the villains, and they could do damage to you at the same time. I would say the human characters in A Touch of Evil are much less fragile. You can get knocked out, but then you end up back at the town hall. And that progresses the game. That increases the shadow track, which is sort of the tracking how much power the evil character has. But it doesn't result in you being out of the game or that sort of thing. In Last Night on Earth, you have the characters, as they take wounds, they get closer to dying. And once they die, you have to roll up and get out a new character. And generally a certain number of characters dying will be one of the ways the zombie player can win. Both games depend a lot on drawing cards and seeing what happens, or playing cards and seeing what happens. They're very thematic, really involve the theme and the art and the play style, but also very, very luck driven. These aren't the kinds of games that you can play if you really want your strategy to translate directly to victory, or you want a very minor roll of luck. In this game, you're constantly rolling dice, and generally you need a 5 or better to hit. And so the likelihood of succeeding based on the dice is generally pretty low. You have to get a bunch of equipment. Like I said, thematically these games are really good. And they both Last Night on Earth and A Touch of Evil heavily welcome expansion material. So Last Night on Earth, they've done that through a number of hero packs, a number of zombie upgrades, additional scenarios you can buy. And then the big thing is they have 2 more big boxes of different stuff that you can add into the game to expand the materials that are available in the game. So there's more locations, there's more cards, there's more boards, etc., etc. In A Touch of Evil, they've done the same thing. They have 2 big box expansions along with several sets of hero upgrades and some villain upgrades. Now, my friend Rob, hey Rob, has pretty much everything involved in Last Night on Earth. He is a Last Night on Earth fiend, and based on the fact that he had all this already, I have, been content with just my 1 box of Last Night on Earth stuff. Instead, I have collected everything for A Touch of Evil, and I have almost everything. The only thing I don't have, as far as I can tell, is that when they came out with the 10th anniversary of A Touch of Evil, they came out with little minis for the 4 different significant locations in the base game. They have not made those available for separate purchase, and I don't really want to go pay $100 to buy a new copy of A Touch of Evil when I already have it. So I have not upgraded my set to match that. But I have all the other expansions. I have both sets of hero upgrades. I have the villain upgrades, or the additional villains. I have both big box sets. And I actually recently got hero weapon upgrades at Gen Con, although we did not get to try those yet. All in all, both games are really fun. It's very hard for me to say that I like one more than the other. I think ultimately I like A Touch of Evil just a little bit better because I have a lot of different zombie games, but I really like Last Night on Earth as well. So I'm happy to play either of those if you and I are in the same space and you want to try one. They're both a good time, but they are really cheesy and very luck focused. And so you have to kind of have as an attitude the idea that the game is going to be that kind of game. But if you do, boy, there's a lot of fun to be had in the games from Flying Frog Productions. Well, that's about it for me today. I hope that you've had a pleasant walk. I know I have, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining me. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.